Okay, let's see. The doors are open now. Let's see who we get. Yep. Hey, come on in. We're just about to get the webinar started. I see John. We got, the great thing about webinars is everyone has a front row seat. And Josh, I know you well. We do quite a bit of work with you. John, Shoal, Paul, we're gonna have a nice intimate group. So there's a good chance that we could unmute and actually have the benefit of interacting with each other. Which that's even better. So hey, as you come in, if you can go to the chat box and put the city that you're located at, that'll help David and I, kind of guide the conversation about what might be more topical to you. So if you want to come in and put the city that you're in, then we'll kind of have the conversation. And David, I'm really excited. I was introduced to you by a friend named Jeff in Canada, and I talked to your team member, and then he turned me on to your book. And the minute I started reading your book, I got to admit, I didn't read it, I listened to it. And man, I was like, God, this is it. This is what we've been looking for. So I'm really glad that you're here to kind of bestow some of your experience on us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very much looking forward to it. And I think being a smaller group as well, like you said, let's make this really interactive. We'll open it up and almost like a workshop where we can take a participant, and then we might even just workshop some of the examples. I think that's really one of the best ways to get the most learning from this.
Yeah, that'll be great. I see we got Peter from Leesburg, Virginia, which is not too far from where I'm at. I'm in Bethesda, Maryland, right outside of DC, in Leesburg. I can't quite walk there, but it's not too far away. And we got Paul from Michigan. And Paul, I don't think we spoke before, but I'm glad you're with us. Okay, David. So we're at time. You ready to kick things off?
Yeah, let's do it. I'll let you drive and do the intro, and then I'll jump into the presentation.
Yeah, that's perfect. So my name is Kirk. I'm the CEO of Foresight CFO. In addition, I teach financial management at Georgetown University for grad students. I really like the grad students because at that point in their lives, they have experience. And so it's just a kind of a different way of pulling out their experience to get the learning. So, and I'm really excited that David has joined us to talk to us about Systemology, the masterclass. And yeah, I remember, especially David, the opening to your book where you talked about when you met Michael Gerber and he was interested in your background and stuff. So it's just a great way to kick off the whole topic. Do you mind introducing yourself, and then we'll get things going?
Yeah, for sure. So David Jennings, as Kirk mentioned, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, bought and sold 3 companies, and started companies from scratch, worked in a variety of different industries. And then my most recent business, probably what I'm most well known for, was in a digital agency that I owned for about 13 years. And the last 3 of those years, I'd hired a CEO. She was running the day-to-day operations. And that enabled me to kind of get completely off the tools and just reshaped my view on business, and I had some good opportunities. We might even touch on a few of those. I know Kirk mentioned Michael Gerber. That was a tremendous opportunity that opened my eyes to think about business systems and address a problem that I think still has been very poorly addressed for businesses. A lot of businesses, they just don't get business systems. So I know we've got a lot to cover, but that's a little bit about me. And I'm based in Melbourne, Australia. So it's on the other side of the world for me. And I'm starting at 7 a.m. So I'm fresh and ready and got my coffee ready to go.
Yeah, I really appreciate getting up early to do this for us. So that's great. And then let's find out who's in the room. I recognize like Josh. The rest of you guys are John Shoal. Nice to see you. If you could, I'm going to launch a poll here so we can do the survey to figure out who's in the room, and that will allow David to kind of gear some of his conversation to companies that are at about the same size that you guys are. So it'd be great if we can get 100% to respond. Definitely 70% would be fantastic, but 100% would be wonderful. Um, and, and then we'll share the results, but your answers are anonymous, right? It's just to get a sense of who's with us here. And I'm gonna keep it open just a half a second more if anybody else wants to get in. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna close, share the results, and good. So this is right in your sweet spot. You got companies that are earlier stage or earlier size, 0 to 5 million, and then one that's 10 to 40. So that's about the right size. That's what you can handle, isn't it, David?
Yeah, for sure. And I think since we're going to be talking to accountants and CFOs, a lot of what we'll talk about, firstly, thinking about applying it to your own business, but then also thinking about applying it to your clients' businesses as well. So that I'm sure a lot of the people in the room are going to have their own clients at different levels. So, but the sweet spot for systemology is um, starting to systemize a business. You've got a small team, I would say at least between sort of 5 and 40 staff. Turnover is about right. I mean, oftentimes it's more to do with the staff than it is the amount of turnover, because it's all about changing culture, getting people to follow a new way, and it just gets exponentially harder the bigger you get, because people find it harder to change the way that they're doing things and the culture's set. So I think we're on the right spot here.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so to set the stage, I mean, I don't know, Foresight's been around. We got 32 team members globally doing this kind of work, and we started to notice, what type of things really produce value for business owners. And if you think about, the CEOs out there, if you think about your business at each stage, if the wheels are shaky now, and then you're going for that next level of growth, then what was just shaky or maybe an irritant becomes a real problem, right? So any chink in the armor now, as you scale, those weaknesses get exploited. And if you go to the next slide, David, so even though we do growth CFO work and accounting work at Foresight CFO, we go beyond the numbers, and we started to learn if we develop certain drivers, like creating a business that is independent of the owner, or creating a business that uses systems so that it's not dependent on key employees, that skill set is just a tremendous foundation skill to pretty much go as far as you want based on your goals, what you want out of the business. Being able to operate according to systems instead of personalities is one of the key factors to really developing that top line to where you want it to be, so that you're getting the household income, and even so you get paid twice. You get the household income tomorrow, and the valuation for when you step back from the business. So the value of developing those 8 drivers, of which systems are a solid part of 3 of the drivers, is on average, the business that develops their score to be 80 plus, they're on average 71% more valuable than the average competitor in that space. So it's really worthwhile. And what we don't have on the finance side, we can measure the impact of the value, like the example here, where if for every $1 million of profitability, increasing your score from the average initial score to 80 plus is worth, over $3.5 million of increased value. So you get paid twice when the business owner is ready to step back from the business. So tremendously valuable. That's why what the CFOs don't have. The CFOs don't have a way of developing systems. So when I learned about what you do, David, where you actually have a method to create that culture, that system driven versus personality driven, I was really excited to hop on the phone call and get to know you, to be at this point today to do a webinar together. So from here, will you make us smarter about systems?
Yes, for sure. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm glad we've been able to have a couple of calls and get a good understanding of your audience and some of the challenges that they're having. I think business systems is definitely an area that's poorly addressed, poorly understood. Oftentimes, I don't think I've had a discussion with a business owner where we haven't agreed that business systems aren't important. whether that's people in the financial space or business owners themselves. Like, we all know they're important. It's just usually a case of, well, it's not urgent, so I'll get to it sometime later. It gets, lower priority. Oftentimes the business owner, many times they're not a systems person. I think what the systems message does resonate quite well with people in the financial space, because at least they have an understanding and appreciation of systems and process. Because a lot of the work that happens in the financial space, there's just a way of doing things, and it needs to happen on a recurring basis. But maybe just to start, and Kirk, you might be the one to chat with, or people can kind of maybe type something into the chat widget. I want to get an idea on some of the reasons why business owners and the people in the room think business systems are so important. I know you touched on valuation. That's a biggie. I think in increasing the valuation. But what are some of the other reasons that you hear that business owners want to systemize or get their systems in place? Like, why do people even show up to like this webinar? What is it that they're hoping systems can do for them?
Yeah, and I just opened up, again, it's a small group, so I opened up the options. If anyone wants to speak up, instead of typing something into a chat box, just come into the conversation and interact with us. And so the question that you asked me is what I've seen. For us, business owners get interested in developing systems when they hit a wall. They hit a stall point, and it could be 1, 2, or 3 years. They're kind of flatlining with some up and down, and they just can't figure out how to get past that, right? Or they've had the experience where they lose a key employee, and they know it sets them back for 2 or 3 months before they can start to move again. So invariably, there's very few of us that do it for proactive reasons. Invariably, it's been they hit some kind of wall that they can't get through.
Definitely. I think that idea of being the bottleneck, especially for the business owner or some principal members in the team where they just hit capacity, and systems can really kind of give you some leverage. The other biggie, which always seems to be after the fact, it's when the team member leaves and then you go, oh, I wish I had the systems in place, because you notice that all of the IP walks out the door. The valuation is another one. Like when we're thinking about like exit planning, and thinking about, well, what makes a business valuable to a potential acquirer. And I can see like John in the group, he'd mentioned that, you're increasing the speed of revenue. So most definitely systems allow you to be more efficient. They also open up capacity in the business, which then enables you to scale. So that's definitely a big one. Allowing sustainable growth, which what I'm finding is when I look at businesses, you want to think in terms of businesses as a collection of systems, and things like sustainable growth. Sometimes people are stronger in certain areas than they are in other areas. So maybe as a finance person, you're really strong in your finance systems, but maybe your marketing systems or your lead generation systems or your sales systems are quite poor. So we think about, if you're looking for sustainable growth and allowing for that capacity, we want to make sure that we've got systems in all areas. And Peter mentioned as well, reducing time to onboard employees, which most definitely, that not only does it reduce the time required to onboard the employees, but it makes sure that they're onboarded correctly, and we're sort of inserting the culture early on and helping them to understand what's acceptable and unacceptable inside the team. So I think onboarding is really key, and also systems to improve cash flow management, 100%. So the way that I think about it is all problems within business, always you can bring them back to the root level, which is at the systems level. So we want to learn how to see businesses through the lens of business systems, and then we want to understand how we can go to work on those systems so we can improve and solve the problems. And the good thing about doing it with a systems perspective is we oftentimes solve the problem once, but then if you solve it forever because you've done it at a systems level. So that, I reckon that's good. Like, I mean, we all agree that systems are important. So my next question is then, why haven't you systemized the business to the level that you want to? or what are some of the beliefs that you have around business systems, and might even be for your clients as well. Like oftentimes I hear people say, oh, creating systems, they're time consuming, it takes too much time, or the business owner thinks they need to be the person who creates the systems. Some people just don't like systems and they go, I'm not a systems person, I'm more creative. Or they think, oh, even if I create systems, my team won't follow them anyway. So I'd love to hear from you, Kirk, and then obviously people can type into the chat or chime in. When I say the word business systems, what bubbles up? Like, is there an immediate feeling or thought around why it can't work or hasn't worked?
I mean, at first glance, it sounds like you're saying budgeting, right? Where it sounds bureaucratic, it sounds administrative, it sounds like it's going to zap the life energy out of us if we even start going down that road. It'll take the creativity out of the business, maybe, right? So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny with that one as well. A lot of people have misconceptions around what a systemized business looks like. When I say what's a systemized business, oftentimes the first thing that comes to mind is McDonald's. Now, McDonald's has every aspect of their business systemized down to the nth degree, meticulously detailed, huge amount of detail where you could get a 15-year-old off the street who doesn't know anything and they can come in and run the fryer and grill the burgers and do all the rest of it. And because they're taking that unrefined talent, they need to have these systems so incredibly detailed to get them up to a point where then they can produce a quality output. But one thing to keep in mind is if we're looking at them, McDonald's been systemizing for 60 years. So we don't want to think about how McDonald's is systemized today. We think about, well, where did McDonald's get started? And I mean, a little bit of homework for everybody before we even start. If you haven't watched the movie The Founder, which tells the story of McDonald's with Michael Keaton, right at the start of the movie, they show them out on a basketball court and they're mapping out what the store might look like and thinking about where the fryer will go and where they'll put the thick shake machine. And that's how basic systems start. So I think something to keep in mind is we don't want to compare to what they are. And the industry that you're in, also the finance space, you're going to be recruiting really smart people who have knowledge. Like, we don't need to tell them how to suck eggs. We don't need to line by line tell them how to open MYOB and click the word file to open blah, 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 blah. That might be way too much detail for a system required. It might be just more guideposts and a framework for them to operate in, and that helps still keep that creativity. We'll touch some more on that. I can see Paul mentions simply not having taken or had the time. So the time is a big one. Oftentimes, too busy putting out fires. It's that whole idea I mentioned. Systems, they're important but not urgent. So very rarely do they, appear on the top of your to-do list. And you, as a business owner or as a key team member, are probably very busy at the best of times. So the idea of trying to document systems and processes, you'll get to it someday, maybe one day. And that's another thing I want to flip on its head. I say the business owner is often the worst person in the team to be doing the documentation. And there's a few secrets we'll share around how to capture systems and make it easy. Because, doing detailed documentation and all that, and leaving it to a knowledgeable, busy team member, they're not going to find the time. So a lot of what I want to do in this presentation is challenge some of the beliefs and misconceptions that you might have around systems and processes, so that we can get you to relook at it and so that you can make this process easy. And that's a big part of what we're going to cover.
And David, to kind of expand the discussion here, most of the people on the phone are running businesses that are not financial related, and so this is the whole
Perfect.
This is the whole universe. And I like how Paul's pointing out is that us CEOs are too busy with multiple hats, putting fires out, so don't have time to do the systems. But the system would be at least part of the solution where you might have fewer fires. You can
Yes.
so yeah.
And it's funny that the business owner, and I bet Paul would know intuitively, he kind of knows that once you get systems in place, it will help to put out some of the fires. But then you're stuck between a rock and a hard place because you've got the fires, which means you don't have the time to create the systems to put out the fires. So now, yeah, you need them the most, yet you can't get to them because you don't have the time. So those are the types of things I want to turn on their head and say, well, how do we make it easy? How do we do it so it doesn't always fall on your shoulders? And how can we empower the team? And how do we make it a two-person job? And how do we use some of the tools and technology to make it easy to capture a system? Which is kind of what we're going to dive into. So yeah, this is good to know as well. So I touched a little bit on my story. The one bit that I did want to just mention was where I had a big realization and opening was I'd built up Melbourne SEO, that digital agency, that last business that I ran, and I hired a CEO, Melissa, who was running it. She ran it for 3 years. I never had any plans of selling that business. And because it was a bit of a cash cow for me, because we systemized it, I'd meet with her basically every quarter and I'd get a quarterly profit distribution as a business owner. And I'd actually started working on another business while she was running that business, which is basically Systemology that I was working on. And she got some news from her family because she was based here in Australia, but a family member wasn't well. She had to fly back to the States, spur of the moment, literally, hey, I'm going next week. Hops on a plane, flies over, and when she comes back, she resigned. She said, look, I'm going to have to move back to the States, and I'm not going to be able to run the company from the States. So it was a very big shock for me because I was sort of unprepared for that. I had thought, things were going swimmingly and it was working really well for me and for her. And then I was kind of put in that moment where I was like, oh, what do I do? I can get pulled back into the business and run it, but then that would mean the other businesses I'd involved in would really struggle. And then not only that, even if I got pulled back in to recruit someone, it's going to take time to train them up. Like you can't just plug a CEO in straight away. So I actually went to market and then sold that business. And when I was selling the business, I ended up putting it out to some people in my network, and I got 2 offers quite quickly. And they were quite good multiple. When I ultimately decided to go with the guy who acquired the business, I asked him afterwards why he purchased it, and he cited 2 things. He said financial performance and the fact that I hadn't been in it and running it for 3 years, and it was systems driven. So it had all of the processes. So sometimes, people talk about systemizing in case you sell your business and building it for sale. But you may get to that point and never sell it. But what systems allows you to do is it then gives you options, because you never know what's going to happen, what life's going to throw at you. We didn't know what was going to happen last year in 2020. And it was very revealing for a lot of businesses that they weren't strong. And systems enables your business to be infinitely stronger, moves away key person dependency, makes it more scalable, means you can operate more efficiently. And I'm finding a lot of clients, now there's never been a better time to systemize. So what we're going to look at today, we're going to talk a little bit about what is a system. I just want to get some definitions out so we're all talking the same language, because a lot of people have different words. Then we'll talk about the 4 stages of business systemization, just so you can see where you are and what challenges you're having and where you want to get to. That at least kind of helps you align the direction and gives you some goals. And then towards the end, we'll finish up with what I call the critical client flow. And we'll want a volunteer. I'll get Kirk's help to pick one out, but you can type it into the chat if you'd like to be a volunteer. We'll go through the critical client flow. Basically, we're going to identify the top 10 to 15 systems that you should start on first to systemize your business. Everybody else can follow along, but we'll have a little discussion. We'll do it live. The ideal person for that would be someone who has an existing business, been in business for at least a few years, has a small team. I would say, at minimum, sort of 3 to 5 staff minimum. But also I don't really want to go larger than, 20, 30 staff. Once we kind of get a bit bigger, you start to have some other challenges, like I said, around changing of culture. But yeah, if you want to be a volunteer, just type something into the chat and then Kirk can grab you, or Kirk's going to nominate someone. So we'll see how we go. Okay, so firstly, just thinking in terms of what a system is, and I mean, there's plenty of different terms for systems. People call them processes, checklists, procedures, SOPs, standard operating procedures, work instructions, plenty of different names. I did it in the book Systemology. I just really want to simplify this, and I want to just get everybody to go on the same page, because there are little differences in each of those definitions. But for me, when I talk about a system, I'm just talking about a series of steps that when they're followed, they create a consistent outcome. So think about that. It's a series of steps that when followed create a consistent outcome. That's what a system is. And that definition applies in so many different levels within the business. So we just kind of keep it simple. Now, these systems, they exist everywhere in life. I think just because you might not be aware that you're running a system also doesn't make you immune from their effects. So as I said, systems are in life. You could be running an unhealthy system in your body. You could be eating poorly, not exercising, sitting in front of the screen all day, and that you're effectively running a system. If you're doing that day in and day out, that's an unhealthy system. What is the result of that unhealthy system? The result is that you'll become overweight and unhealthy. But you can't say, I didn't know. I didn't know doesn't get you off the hook of feeling the effects of those systems. So just keep that in mind. Systems exist whether you're conscious of them or not. And it's the same in your business. Your business is a collection of systems, and you might be running unhealthy systems inside your business, and they're creating the problems inside your business. So we need to identify what those problems are, and we need to do the 80-20. We have to figure out what are the 20% that deliver the 80% of the result, and go to work on those systems. So sort of continuing that analogy, imagine your business as a system. And underneath that system, you might have some subsystems. They might be the different departments in your business. Again, whether you're conscious of it or not, doesn't mean you're not going to be feeling the effects of running these systems. You know, you've got sales and marketing and operations and HR and management and finance, and you might have other departments, admin, and maybe there are certain things that are specific for your business, but there are these departments, and the results that you're getting are dependent on how these systems are being run. Now, the systems might be trapped in your team members' heads. They might have a way of doing things, or maybe their way of doing things is they kind of make things up as they go, or one team member does some things a certain way and then another team member does things another way. But regardless of how it's happening, I can tell you all problems link back to the systems level. If you don't have enough leads, then you have some lead generation system problems. If you have troublesome clients who cause issues, they're constantly following you up, they want to know where work's at and why you haven't called them and when is their products going to be delivered. Well, maybe you have poor client onboarding systems. Maybe if you go, well, I just can't get good staff. Well, you'll probably have poor recruitment systems. All problems within business are systems problems. And when you can make that mindset shift, it makes it infinitely easier to identify them, go to work on them, and then improve your business as a result. And just because you might not be aware of them, again, doesn't mean that they don't exist. So that's the real key here. And the first exercise we'll go through with our volunteer is I want to go, well, how do we become aware of these systems? And I've got an exercise that everybody can follow along on to 80-20, to find the 20% of the systems that deliver that 80% of the result. Now, I talked about the different departments, and you can break that up even into smaller chunks as well. So let's say under sales and marketing, there might be lead generation and lead conversion, Or maybe under the HR and management, there's hiring, onboarding, and managing. Or under finances, maybe there's invoices and expenses and reporting. And this is just a visual representation. But the idea is, think of it in terms of the level. Your business at the high level is one big system. Then there are these subsystems underneath that, which are your different departments. And then in each different department, there are systems that make up that department. So we're not McDonald's. We haven't been systemizing for 60 years. We're just getting started. So we have to go, well, where do we start? And we have to find the 20% of the systems that deliver the 80% of the result. And if we can get that across for you today, if the outcome for you is to go, well, I know now what the next 10 systems are that I need to work on in my business and capture and document, then we've got a tremendous win. So that's a big focus of what I'm planning on doing. Now, I'm going to swap over to my iPad because I want to go through one or two graphics, and then we're going to go for that volunteer. But Kirk, are there any sort of questions or anything that sort of popped up with regards to just talking about what a system is?
Yeah, I mean, I was really trying to ping John to see if he'll be a volunteer. So I was doing that. So my mind was elsewhere.
Well, I think the other thing, and I mean, the idea of a system being just a consistent set of steps that you follow that create this consistent outcome. Now, how do you capture that? It could also be done in a variety of different ways. It could be a Loom video, a Zoom video. It could be a video that you record on your phone. It could be a checklist. It could be some basic documentation. Again, I just want to keep it very, very simple. So let's jump over to the iPad. And I just want to walk you through one or two models, and then we'll see. Hopefully, Kirk talked John into being our volunteer. So I'm just going to...
John has a great business for this kind of thing. So John, the time constraint works if you want to jump in with us.
There we go. I'll just jump to there. Now I can.
That'll work, Kurt.
Good. Yeah, and John, I'll tee you up a little bit. For what I know about it, John worked with one of our CFOs, Jose, before, and great business. I mean, best practices, engineering for to produce certain environmental outcomes for your clients. So John, beyond that, how what do you do?
We're in the business of identifying contaminated land, the extent of contamination on lands, particularly grossly contaminated lands, in determining the risk element of that and how that affects the pricing and disposition of that land and future cleanup.
Perfect. Well, if you are happy to be our volunteer, what size team are you working with?
We've got 7 in the US and 1 in Brazil and 1 in Africa.
Perfect. Yes. And it sounds like you've been doing this for a good number of years. Like, I think you'd need to have that level of knowledge.
Yeah, we've been in business for too long and plateaued too long. So
yeah, I think you might be perfect. All right, so let's jump in. The first thing that I want to think about, and we'll really focus in on your business in just after I go through one or two of these models. And Kirk, you can see my screen okay, can't you?
I sure can.
Yeah. So with the businesses that we have worked with over the years, I've found oftentimes businesses fall into one of 4 stages, specifically to do with business systemization and figuring out where you are and where you want to get to. I mean, that's kind of like step number 1. So I think, a lot of people when they first start out in business and also in with business systems is they're kind of in survival mode. Now, the name is a little bit of a giveaway. It's not a great place to be. When I think in terms of this as level 1, the team makes things up as they go. They are oftentimes very much in firefighting mode. So wherever there is an issue or maybe a client who's having trouble, that's where all of the attention goes. And generally speaking, the team does not like process or even the thought of process. This keeps them in survival mode because you really just, it's like performance looks a bit like this. It's very up and down. It's inconsistent. You're chasing work, you're getting work, you're doing work. The work comes to an end, then you chase, get, do, and it's kind of this up and down cycle. There's no real consistency and there's no control over the business. The biggest thing that holds people in this level.
Hey, Dave, just to make sure, is everyone, you should be seeing a graph, a bell-shaped curve that David's drawing. If not, if you look at his image and click on his image, it'll pop up for you.
Perfect. Now, generally speaking, what holds business owners in this, and they are the bottleneck, is that the business owner doesn't even recognize that they're the bottleneck. So a lot of the companies that I work with, generally speaking, they've moved through the survival stage because they at least recognize that they're the bottleneck. If you don't even, it's like you don't know what you don't know when you're in survival mode. You are really just acting on instinct. So that's kind of like that level 1 survival mode. Then people kind of move into the next level. We call this one stationary. Now, stationary, again, name gives it away. It's not a great place to be, but it's better than survival mode. And some of the criteria or characteristics of this, because everybody listening is thinking about, well, where do I fit into this graph? Oftentimes in stationary mode, all of the systems or the way things are done, they're trapped in team members' heads, which then makes you very key person dependent. You know, if Jane in accounts takes the day off, then Bob, the client, doesn't get his invoice and we have to wait until Jane comes back to issue out that invoice, or work doesn't get done until that person is around, which creates obviously loads of trouble if something happens to those person. But in stationary mode, very key person dependent. You might get some that are kind of in on the idea of systems and processes, some out. There's not like a uniformity that, yes, you know, we appreciate and accept systems and have a way of doing things. But what this does, because you have the IP trapped in team members' heads, you get this, it's almost like a flat line. That's why I call it stationary. Oftentimes this is where you can't grow past a certain point because you haven't got the systems and the processes in place which allow for the scale. That's oftentimes when you hit this glass ceiling and you feel you're stationary. Now, the key to get through this stage is to extract the IP out of the heads of the team members. The other thing that happens at this stationary, sometimes it feels like, you know, you're just spinning plates. It's like you do a little bit of work, you jump to the next task, you do a little bit of work, you jump to the next task, you do a little bit of work, you assign some work to one team member, you assign some work to the next team member, you get all the way around, and then you don't really get time to do much of your own work. You're keeping everybody else busy, and you're just watching these plates, hoping that they don't fall off and break. So it's the spinning plates is a great analogy at this level. Again, everybody thinking about, you know, what are some of these characteristics and can they hear themselves in one of these stages? The next one is, we call this one scalable. Now, scalable, we're starting to get on the right track at this level. What generally happens at this level is you start to get things partially documented. So you might have some systems, but they're usually scattered everywhere. You know, they might be on Dropbox or Google Drive, on people's desktops. Some are still in team members' heads. Some might be in some videos. Like they're a little bit all over the place. So it's like you've got some things which helps you grow, but it's quite clunky. And probably one of the biggest telltale signs that you're in scalable is that you have to constantly remind your team to follow process. And that's probably, again, the biggest giveaway if you're finding, hey, you have to keep reminding team members. The performance, though, at this level does start to pick up. But the way to move through this level, it's all about then starting to organize the knowledge. So in survival mode, it's a little bit all over the shop, very haphazard. Stationary, okay, well now we're kind of working as a business, but we're still very person dependent. Organized, we're starting to get, or scalable, we're starting to get things out of people's heads, but it's a bit clunky. And then this leads to the final stage, which we call saleable. And this is really where we're getting to. And like I mentioned at the start, saleable doesn't necessarily mean you are going to sell. Saleable means you have a saleable business. Now, how do you know when you get to saleable? Well, your business now, all of the departments are starting to get good documentation. And, you know, you've got lead generation systems, you've got a sales process, you've got an onboarding process, you've got recruitment systems, you've got finance systems, you've got management systems, and you're starting to get it in place. And your business then starts to run a little bit more like a Swiss watch because there's a way of doing things and it's not person dependent. And the biggest giveaway is that people say, this is how we do things here. When you get to that point, that's when you know you've reached this saleable stage. Whether you sell or not is irrelevant, but you start to get that full documentation, and then you can start to work on optimizing the process. And then you start to look for problems in the business and you re-engineer the system to solve that problem. And it becomes a real sort of way of doing things. So the question, and maybe we pick on John for the moment. Everybody can type in perhaps where they feel they're up to on this continuum. We're all goaling to get to the scalable. But John, can you give us a little bit of insight? If we think of this as a scale down the bottom here, where you think you might be, and you might have one foot in one area and another foot in others, but that might be helpful to get some insight.
Yeah, we're in the clunky stage.
Yeah.
Stepping into the saleable, and that's because we consciously recognized that about 1.5 years ago and have been working a year to get past the extraction. We've got it down in a lot of different clunky systems. Now we need to get them all tied together and smooth out the workflow. And
perfect.
And we're seeing that moderate growth that you talk about there.
Yeah. And that the final stage is once you really get this cranking, that's when you start to see the performance really kick off. So that's good that you're kind of already growing. You've gotten some good success. That's how you've able to build the business to where it is today. You've got a good sized team members of 7, which means you've got some workflow coming through. So it kind of makes sense that you're about this stage. When you think back as well, some of the characteristics that I mentioned about the earlier stages, do you remember going through those stages?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And we run a team of scientists who are very independent, creative people, and they really don't want to leave the survival stage.
Yes.
There's culturally a challenge to get them to want to extract the knowledge out of their heads.
Yeah. That's actually, that leads really well into this. I've got this other graphic that helps kind of visualize something. This is the iceberg. I think when people start the idea and say, I want to systemize my business, oftentimes they're focusing what's above the surface. Now, this might be, software, it might be tools, maybe they read a book or they listen to a podcast and they go, if I get this whiz bang project management software, all of my systems problems are going to be solved. And this is where they focus. But what you said just there shows that you are further along the process because you start to realize that there are other pieces to make this work. If you want to build a systemized business, just the software and the tools is not enough. There's a few things we talk about in systemology. One of them is you've got systems certainty. That's all about, yes, you've got to have the systems documented and that's part of it, getting it down. So you've got certainty in the way that people are doing things. Then the next one we've got is the performance, systems performance. And that has to do with, yes, selecting the tools are part of it, but more than that, it's about making sure that the tools work together, making sure that there's accountability and performance KPIs, so the team have everything that they need. So you have everything documented, you get certainty from that. Performance, that's all about getting the right tool set. And the last thing, which you said, which is actually key, and without this, you'll never systemize your business, is buy-in. And a lot of people, when they go, oh, I tried to systemize in the past and it failed. If they say that to me, I can guarantee one of these three areas they missed. They didn't get the clear documentation down. They didn't have the right tools and the right performance indicators, or they didn't get buy-in. You actually need to get all three to build a systemized business. And sometimes it's a challenge with the individuals. Like you mentioned, you know, if you're working with scientists, and I used to own a video production business, and it was the same. We had videographers, and videographers are creative people, and trying to get them to follow systems and processes is a little bit like herding cats. It's a challenge. And part of it has to do with, as well, all of the resistance oftentimes comes from your existing team. It's if someone's been onboarded correctly and inducted into the way that you do things, the resistance is actually significantly less, because you're saying this is how we do things here. And if you don't fall into this is how we do things here, you're not the right fit. So that's part of it. But it's all about getting these three things. And by doing that, that actually unlocks what's at the base of the iceberg, which is really why the business owner and the leadership team should be thinking about systemizing. Is the ultimate goal of what we're going to here is we're looking for complete business reliability. If you get certainty, performance, and buy-in, you get a reliability in your business like never before. So that's really the goal, figuring out that. Now, the most common question that I get, though, is, well, where do I start? And that's really the last part of what we want to cover today, because I want to give you guys some really actionable take-home initiatives to answer that first question. Is, yeah, Dave, I'm sold on the idea of systems. I like it. I can see why it hasn't worked in the past. I can see where I am. I can see where I want to get to. Then the next most important question is, okay, what are the 10 or 15 systems that you should focus on now to systemize the business? And I've got an exercise. Everybody can kind of follow along. It's called the critical client flow. We're going to do it with John now. If you want to get a copy of this template, you can head to systemology.com/academy, systemology.com/academy. I know Kirk's going to send out the recordings later, so you can pop the link with that. Or, I mean, just draw it out on an A4 bit of paper. You don't need my template. But let's have a little bit of a look here. I'm just going to get you quickly. We'll start off with the target client, John, for your business. The target client is the person who's easy to work with, pays your advertised prices, refers friends and family, comes back to you maybe for more products than, just one, like they come for multiple products and services, and you would like more of. Can you give me an idea on who you would say your target client is?
Are you speaking like an industry?
Yeah, look, however you want to define it, or even if we narrow it down to the person. So yeah, combination of person and industry. So what industry?
Chemical. Manufacturing.
And it's who are you dealing with? Is it the business owner? Is it someone on their team, or is it residential, commercial? What type of client is that in the chemical?
It would be the corporate cleanup managers, responsible parties.
Yeah. Cool. Now, what would be we call this the primary product or service. What would be the first product or service that you would sell to them that then becomes a great gateway into the rest of your product line? So like the very first thing that you might sell them, what would be that product?
We would call that an assessment, a site assessment.
And that's perfect. So now we kind of move down to, and everybody can do this. They'll have their own A4 bit of paper, and you just scribble along with me here. The reason we do those, first two, target client and the product or service, is just to get, it's the anchor point and making sure, like, there's hundreds of systems you could be working on in the business. Let's just focus on the ones that, if we're going to optimize them or create them, that bring in whoever that dream client is. And if we can get the business to deliver that core product or service without any key person dependency, we'll get a huge win. So the next question is, we're going to fill this out with what are you currently doing, not what you would like to do. So tell me, how do you currently get the attention of those corporate cleanup managers? Like, I'm imagining referrals is probably one thing.
That's the first thing I would have said, referrals.
Yep. Are there any other ways that you get their attention? Do you do AdWords or SEO or website or speaking or
Professional
LinkedIn?
conferences.
Yeah.
Where we serve as a subject matter experts
Perfect.
on those. Teaming arrangements.
Is when you say teaming arrangements, is that like a joint venture type thing, or?
Yeah, not to the degree of a joint venture, but teaming with other technology providers to solve the problem, come up with a solution.
Yeah, perfect. And are there any others, or that they're probably where you get most of your leads?
Well, we work at lead generation, but not very systemized.
Yeah, perfect. And that's good. Once you go through this as well, sometimes, right at the start, I was talking about becoming aware of your systems. Sometimes going through this, you notice where you're patchy in the critical client flow, and that can help you to go, oh, I might have to plug that area because that might explain why I'm having, I don't know, lead generation problems or whatever it is. So that's good. We'll focus on what you're currently doing. Next one is, when you get an inquiry, how do they come in? Do you get phone or website form fill outs or email introductions or all of the above?
All the above.
And what happens from a sales perspective? Like, the inquiry comes in, and do you have a short qualification call? Do they fill out a survey? Do they, like, what to move into the sales thing? What happens next? Or do you hop on a Zoom or a site visit and then you start, like, what happens next?
Usually there's a response and we say we would like to help them, but we need to know some background information and understand their goals and objectives. So we ask them to send us what they can release at this point in time in terms of background information, and ask them to we schedule what we call a needs analysis review with them, so we can understand what they're trying to do, what their challenge is, and what their time frame and budget is.
Yep.
So it's what we call a pre-qualification or a needs analysis.
Then so there's the scheduling of it. Then we have the call. Now, is that something that happens like via Zoom, or are you doing that in person?
Mostly it would be Zoom.
Yep. And then after that, are there more meetings, or at that point, do you put together a proposal, or what happens next?
It depends a lot on the degree of complexity to the project. There may be many meetings, or there may just be that was good enough for a smaller site. So you can imagine trying to do something at a small dry cleaning is a lot different than a petrochemical manufacturing facility.
So if we go back to, let's say, the target client being the chemical, and we're talking about corporate cleanup managers, would they fall into the bucket of having multiple calls?
Yes,
Do you think? I know it could vary. Pardon?
Multiple calls, multiple work planning evolutions, multiple qualification steps.
Yeah.
Could go on for 1 to 2 years.
Yes. Yeah. So there might in here we'll capture it's almost like the best case scenario, the flow that everybody goes through that for this for this target client. So you'll have a Zoom. Let's say that went really well.
Mhm.
That you might say, oh, even if it goes really well, we might only have 1 or 2 meetings. Or
Mhm.
3 meetings or 5 meetings. I know it can vary, but in the best case scenario, we might capture how many of those calls or what the structure of those calls might look like. At the very least, we can capture the first call, because there's going to be certain things that you're asking on that first call that's going to be the same for every first call. As you kind of learn about the project. Now, as they're getting closer, so, you might have multiple calls, more further qualification. Once you're kind of getting closer to the point, do you issue out any sort of proposal or scope of
Yeah.
works?
Yeah. At that point, then there's what we call a joint scope of work. This is what we're all going to do together to succeed.
Yeah. Perfect. And then when we go, great, we're all in agreement, what happens next? Do you take any money at that point? Like, do they do a deposit or do they pay all at the end? What happens?
In the US, no. Internationally, generally, yes. So it varies depending on country and culture and
If we think
processes.
about our target client,
So
what
let's
would
say no. Let's say
Yep.
no.
Yep. And once they're ready to go and we go, great, agreed on the scope of works, is there any, like, how do you then set up the project for success? Is there some, initial setup where you get them into your system?
Yes.
Or
Yeah, significant onboarding. So there's kickoff calls, there's setting up information systems, there's contracting, subcontracting.
Yeah,
A lot of steps in that onboarding process.
Perfect.
And Dave, we're coming up on time, so I want to make sure we land on time. And John's saying a little bit late for us, so I appreciate that. So
Yeah.
can we illustrate where we're taking people?
Yeah, very close. So which is good. So now we're basically down to the final 2 steps here. Then there's probably the doing of the work. Now there's going to be lots down here. And then the final step is like the handover, which is, maybe there's a final meeting, and when you also introduce them to your products and services and other things, how you might help them. Now that might also then kind of loop back up here, because you've got existing clients that might then start into other products and services.
Yeah.
So certain systems here are going to require more detail than others. So for example, onboarding and delivery sounds like there are a lot of steps. But in situations like that, just start with what we call an overview system, very high level. What are the key steps? There might be subsystems that you break out after that, and you go into things in more detail. But the takeaway here, and everybody can do what we've just done, is this helps you to identify the top 10 to 15 systems in a business, even if we're talking high level systems to start with, on where you should start. And you can focus further depending on where you've got problems in the business. But if you can systemize just this piece, then you're systemizing how the business makes money. And that's the real key here. If we can deliver this without key person dependency, then that's the best place to start. Don't worry about HR systems, onboarding systems, management systems. All of that will come later. So that's pretty much that exercise. I'm going to just swap back to myself just there. Hopefully that was helpful for you, John. I'll share it, and also for everybody else. Like, it's an easy exercise. Identify that linear journey that the customer and the client goes through to deliver that core product or service, and then you're on the path. So I know, John, if you have to jump off, I don't know if there are any questions or comments just before you do that, and then I'm probably about 2 or 3 minutes off finishing this presentation.
Yeah, and just to highlight like that, just briefly, in 15 minutes, you literally laid out the key processes. So if that's not already done in our businesses, good place to start. And we're already starting to achieve consistency because now it's clear how one thing leads to another. And invariably, oftentimes we see that top line, that revenue growth is where the challenge is for business owners. And just by doing this, where do you get your leads? What do you do with them? I mean, that alone can add tremendous value to the business.
And that is effectively step number one in the systemology process. It's the define stage. It's all in the book. The book outlines the process in great detail, talking about the critical client first and then moving through 7 stages. You need to identify them. We need to then find out where the knowledge is. We want to extract it out of the heads of the team members. We want to organize that knowledge. We get the buy-in. We then want to try and identify what other systems we need for scale. And then lastly, we start to optimize. So it's like the process that we go through. When you kind of see it all come together, Chris Mulcani here is an accountant I worked with in regional Victoria. They work, with agricultural type businesses, farms. They help with cash flow management, tax planning, all those sorts of things. He identified a systems champion because where we can, we try and take the business owner out of the equation because business owners are busy. You start off doing the critical client flow, but then you get the team member to really drive it on their behalf and capture what the business owner and key team members are doing. So we did the critical client flow with him. I then met with Rachel and Amy and we started recording these. Then we just collected the videos. We started off with videos first and we recorded the person doing the thing. And then we started to add detailed documentation. I mean, that's just one story with Chris. There's literally hundreds of companies that we've worked with to really do this, to sort of break that mold of what people think systemization is about. It's all on the website. The book's the best place to start though. But we covered today, the 3 main things. We talked about what a system is. We talked about the 4 stages of systemization. And we talked about the critical client flow and where you should get started. I'm happy to go a few minutes longer to answer any questions. I know Kirk will have some points to cover. I'm going to suggest, and obviously I'm a little bit biased, but get yourself a copy of the book. It's over on Amazon. There's the audio book, there's the hardcover, there's the Kindle, however you want to do that. I'm happy to answer any questions, though, that you might have, but that's sort of the core part of the presentation that I wanted to cover.
Yeah, and David, thank you. I really recommend for those who haven't read the book yet, read the book. It's just, not only is it useful, the way David writes is really entertaining, and he pulls in stories with different companies that you'll recognize, and you're sure to have some of those aha moments where it really connects with you. So definitely read the book. What I like about your approach is it's not more things for the CEO to do. You get your champion. You can bring somebody external where that's their job to make sure it gets done, and the benefits. I think the benefits are realized pretty quick. I'm going to say the first 90-day sprints, you start to see some outcomes, and from what a whirlwind starts to seem a little more orderly, and team members and the CEOs start to get time back, where you can bring.
Yeah, we see it all the time. It's the compounding effect. You don't see it on the first system or 2. It's only once you start to get a collection of them and you win a little bit of time back on a whole range of different things. And then it compounds and gets bigger. And then your team learns the process. Then they become more involved and you change the culture. And then really you completely change the course of your business.
Yeah. Thanks you. And Cole, I appreciate you joining in. You're a recent introduction from Jeff in Canada, cost savings. And Peter, I know you're not too far from where I am, doing that data management expertise. So if you guys need introductions to each other, let me know. Just make these kind of events really useful. But we're going to follow up with everybody. I'll send a recording of this, and you can download the slide deck to figure out what you want to do for your own business. But hey, David, thank you so much. I appreciate this. Is the first afternoon event we did, so I appreciate a chance to do this with you. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. I'm going to wrap it up, and I'll talk to you all soon.